Hello?
Hello?
I'm back to making the videos game. In the last devlog, I finished my 2D momentum platformer, and in this one I am working on a funny magical puzzled game. Since this is the first devlog of the new videos game, I shall briefly explain the design of the new game. The idea of the game is that you are a little wizard, because I have a little type of character I like to design for, and you have a selection of spells in your little book, and you are able to open this book at any time, select any number of different spells and combinations, and then cast these, and these will all combine to make your own unique spell. The spells are coded in a way where you can combine any number of these and any amount of these up to 5, so you could combine 5 ices or 5 fires, or a combination of ice and fire, or any other spell in the list, and these will create their own unique spell. As such, these have to be coded in a way where the spells can combine together and create some unique logic for how they are used. As you may imagine, this is an absolute nightmare to code for, so it's the kind of game system I really enjoy making. Realistically, I don't feel like the magic system I have in place right now is anything more than a prototype, but it is a fun prototype to work on. It's a little bit complicated to imagine, probably because you're not in my little old brain, so I will give an example of maybe a fun combination of spells that you could do. There are the push-pull spells, which are essentially just a values of movements of spells. These are combined so you can move objects in the world. For example, you make a spell with the rune from your book. Push, this, when cast, will push whatever the spell hits. But now, you open your little book and you add the rune rise. This is going to not only push the object, but it is going to throw it upwards into the air. So you've now made a spell that is going to move something diagonally. This is pretty simple. So there's 35 other runes to make it more complicated. Now, let's say you add the goo rune. This is going to move your object and also turn it into goo, so when it lands, it's going to bounce. Now, let's maybe say you want a block on a ledge and you want to get it to the other side, but there is a gap in the way. Do you have a spell where you make it try to move at a diagonal point, or do you use a spell to turn into smoke and then drift it across the gap because it now floats because it's been turned into smoke with your spell? The idea is basically that you have a bunch of spells and you can solve puzzles in the game in creative ways in whatever way you come to, because things are made to be pretty open-ended in the system of how the spells work and also the system of how the puzzles will work. Right now, I only have some of these spells planned, but currently I have the 5 movement spells, these being push, pull, rise, slam, and twist. Push, pull is pushing and pulling, rising and slamming is moving it up or down, and twisting is rotating. I then have wait and life. Wait adds a delay to a spell, which will either delay when the spell impacts onto something, so adding a delayed reaction. So you can make something rise with a weight assigned to it, so you can hit an object with that. It will then rise in 5 seconds, so you could run to it, jump on it, and then it will fling you upwards with it, because it has this delay attached to it. Or you can add this to a stream or beam spell, which are a type of spell where it creates a stream of water instead of an actual regular spell, or a beam of a laser, which I will get onto how they work in a moment. And this will delay when this actually fires, creating just a floating ball in space, which will then eventually fire. Will this be useful in any puzzle, or is there any point to this spell system? I don't know. We then also have the elemental spells, these being fire, ice, goo, smoke, and nullify. The 4 elementals of fire, ice, and smoke can be combined together to make other elementals, so fire and ice makes water, fire and goo makes I'm not sure, I haven't planned it yet, and nullify will return an object to normal. Hitting an object with any of these elements will turn it into that element, so hit an object with goo, it turns into goo, hit it with fire, it turns into a molten fireball. These then have their own interactions. For example, an object that is ice will have more deceleration when moving, and also you will make objects dead on it more slippery, and maybe something else, maybe it will melt, I'm not sure. Then we have stream and beam. These will fire a spell in a beam or fire a spell in a stream, so a stream of water or a lasered beam. Not sure what these would be used for, maybe hitting something continuously with a spell Who's to say? Next we have the way the spells are created. This is pretty simple in the game. You open a little book and then you select your spells. These have an index assigned to them, so basically they are a bunch of buttons, you press them, and then whatever index that spell is assigned to your current selected spell. You'll have 5 different slots, and 0 accounts for no spells, so selecting 0 will erase the furthest, most recent rune added. All this is really doing is creating a list of ints, which are whatever your current spell is, and when this list is full, it will replace the furthest one on the list. The way this works is when you cast a spell, these values are read, and whatever the spell is sure to do or behave like is deduced from this list. So if, for example, you have the integer of 17, we will know that this spell should be a stream and therefore should act in a very specific way when shot. As in, it should be like a stream of water. My favourite aspect about this is when you make a spell, the actual colour of the spell will change. Each of these spell runes themselves have a colour value assigned to them. So for example, fire is red and water is blue. These will change both the effects of the player casting the spell and also the effects of the spell itself. Right now I just have the fire visuals and star visuals for the spells integrated into the game, but you can tell when I cast a different spell, the colour of the spell will change. This is very, very simple. I have the list of runes, I have a selection of colours assigned to these runes. When you make a spell, it will check through this list. If the rune is not 0, as in it's an actual used rune and not just a empty dud, it will get the colour of this. It will then combine all of the colours together. There is a priority assigned to the first rune for some reason. Hopefully the colours look nicer. But aside from that, this makes all the spells unique. This is just a little bit of visual flavouring I like to add to the game to make it more unique. I felt like if you were casting a bunch of spells but the spells are always the same colour and visual, that would be a bit boring. So now each different element has its own visual effect for when you fire it, and each different spell combination will have its unique colour assigned to it as well. Great lengths were taken to make sure that the colour combinations do not always just become a muddied brown colour, because when you combine a bunch of different colours together, that's generally what happens. So the colours are combined together and also given priority to the first colour, so the hue is generally maintained from whatever you are selecting, and also the more colours you are combining together, the more the saturation is increased, so the actual colour is not muddied and darkened over time of combining a bunch of different colours and having them colourless towards each other. The way I assign these colours is pretty simple. I have the player's visual particle effects that are played whenever you want to cast a spell. These are the glow that goes behind you and the little stars you create as you cast your spell. And then I have the visual effects for the spells themselves, these being the particle systems that they create as the spell is cast, and also the sprite systems that are created when the spell is also cast. And these are just changed over to the colour of whatever colour has been generated from the selection of spells that you have. Finally, I will talk about the way that streams and beam spells differ from regular spells. When you have a regular spell, you go to cast the spell, and then you cast the spell. When you have a stream or a beam, this will cast the spell, and then will continuously cast the spell as long as you are holding the input down, and also change the visual for the spell itself. So this gives the impression of you firing a continuous stream of water or a continuous beam of energy, when in reality you're just holding a button down and casting a bunch of visuals which, when placed together, give the idea of a seamless beam of water or a seamless stream of laser, when in actuality it is just a bunch of sprites that are placed very neatly next to each other. Finally, I will talk about what happens when the player casts a spell without selecting any runes. This is a completely pointless thing that I added and then thought it would be funny, so I just kept it. When the player tries to cast a spell without any runes, they explode and are covered in goo. The player will then have a time when they are stuck in this state for washing the goo off themselves and going back to normal. Why did I add this, you may ask? I thought it would look interesting. And it does. It does, however, mean I have to add an additional 120 frames of animation to the character for this one instance of the player trying to cast a spell, but not quite as many spell values, which I don't think the player would ever do because it's very pointless. I wanted to draw the goo animation, and I think it looks interesting, so I added it. There is a lot more systems to this game that I would like to discuss in further detail, but I know my videos can get a bit long-winded because I just autistically infodump at you for a long time. So I'm going to separate those into different videos that I will just post later, as I always do. You understand YouTube, you get the categorization of videos instead of one long 27-hour video. The other systems are, of course, the elemental systems, the moving object systems, the actual player visual systems, and the changing of elemental systems. There's the elemental systems of how they function physically, and also the changing an object into another element. It's a complicated system. It deserves 2 videos. And also the system of, you may have noticed, the actual visual style of the game, and how it is weird. I would very much like to talk more about the visual style of the game in the next video, because I am quite proud of how the 2D frame drawn animation has maintained its quality so far in this project. I'm a big fan of how the character looks. I like 2D animation now. I have of course done 2D animation in the past, but with rigged frames and not just completely hand-drawn. The main character in this game is going to be completely hand-drawn frame animated. I'm not sure about other NPCs, they will probably be 2D rigs because that's a lot of work for every character in the game. And also some of the animations for UI elements like the book opening that I would like to discuss in more detail. The book is 3D for some reason. I'm a big fan of this blending of 3D and 2D visual styles. I think it looks very good and is very fun to do. So the next devlog will be about that. This is the outro section.